Welcome to week 2, Testing Fundamentals. So this week we will learn about the process of testing something. We will accomplish this by doing a little testing of our own. So the first part that I really want to focus on this week is the reading quiz. You can go ahead and take a look at this overview if you like. It's pretty simple, just an overview of what the agenda is for this week, but I'm not going to spend any time on this. So the reading quiz, let's go ahead and jump into that. So there are 2 parts of the reading assignment this week. First, you have to find 3 sources describing how the autofocus works for your camera. This can be any camera, your cell phone camera, all the way up to some advanced camera like a DSLR or a GoPro. So any camera, but you have to find 3 sources describing how the autofocus works for your camera. The second part is you are to visit the Association for Software Testing website, and the link is right here. So I'm going to jump in and talk about the 3 sources. So the point of this is that we are actually going to be learning how the autofocus works on our cameras, writing a business case and test plan, and then actually conducting the tests. So throughout the semester, we will learn more about each of these steps. So this is just an introduction, the fundamentals for this. So first off, you have to decide on what type of camera that you want to use. You need to be specific. So like a Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra Pro camera, for an example. So you have to be specific on the model and the type of camera that you'll be using. This information will be beneficial for you later down the road. So next you need to gather your 3 resources on that specific type of camera and how the autofocus feature works. So you really have to understand the ins and outs of this feature for your specific type of camera. Every camera is going to be different. So you really have to understand your specific product in order to test it. And that's fundamental for any software that you'll be testing. You have to really understand it and understand how it works to do most of your testing. There are some exceptions out there, like if you're doing black box testing, but you still, even with that, you still have to have somewhat of an understanding on what the product is and how it works. So you really want to dig deep into gather information on how the autofocus feature works for your specific type of camera. Next, we'll be creating a test plan, and this test plan is going to be used for creating your test cases, which we'll go over in a minute, as well as actually conducting the experiment, doing the testing, and then writing a report on your findings on your testing experiment. For the test plan and conducting the testing and the report, I did create a template for you that we can go over together, but just wanted to lay that out there. Trying to pull up my template.
Well, we're waiting.
The next part that I want to bring up before I jump into the template is enrollment in your groups. So starting in week 3 onward, you will be working in groups. So I would use the icebreaker from week 1 to form your groups if you haven't already. So get to know the people that you might want to work with, and then go ahead and enroll in a group. And if you click on this link here in iLearn, it'll give you instructions on how to do that. So I'm not going to go into the detail. The instructions are pretty good there. But please do that this week because you will need your groups starting next week. All right, so let's jump into the report on the autofocus findings. So for this specific assignment, we are going to be gathering information about the system under test. In this case, the thing that we are testing. So gathering information about the system under test is a key activity in the testing process. Without understanding how the system is supposed to work, how can you know if we found a defect? So that's the point of your 3 articles like I mentioned. The purpose of this learning activity is to report on what we have found in our personal research and to read about what other people have found. This will be done in 3 steps. First, carefully read the sources that you have previously found. Second, write about what you learned in a discussion board thread. And finally, read what other people have found about the same camera. So if there is already a post about your specific camera on the discussion board, go ahead and just make your post or your reply underneath that specific camera. That way, all that information is in one place, and we don't have, GoPro 4 and multiple different locations on the discussion board. Also, cite your sources, so that way, if someone wants to go out and look at your sources, then they can go ahead and look at that. For this, a simple hyperlink is fine. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. So that's all I'm going to say about the autofocus report. Go ahead and read through these instructions on here, but that's the high-level overview. Now that we feel we understand how the autofocus system works on the camera, the final step is to actually find out how it actually works. To do this, we will create a test plan, conduct our test, and report on our findings. So I'm going to skip through this. You should read through these instructions, but I'm going to pull up my template instead and just go over it that way. So this is the template that I conducted, or that I created. Like week 1, there's some comments in here for you, some useful information. I tried putting this concise enough to where it's easy to understand and you can easily just go ahead and create your test plan. So the first part that I want to mention here is that the test plan that we are making is pretty simple. It's not too complex, but it can get pretty complex depending on your organization and the type of project that you're working on, your different resources allocated to that project. So I included a link to a template that you could use for something else other than this simple assignment. So this template is something that you might actually use in your company that you're working for. So let's go ahead and jump into the assignment. So the first part that you have to do is actually come up with test cases. So let me first off start by mentioning that a test plan is a series of experiments that we can follow to learn more about the unit under test. We call these experiments test cases. Each of these test cases are individually described with sufficient detail that anyone can carry them out. So you should be able to hand this off to a complete stranger that has a basic understanding of the cameras and how the autofocus works, and they should be able to conduct your experiment, follow each test case to the T, and still get the same results as you. So that's a good point to mention, that if you would go in and do these tests multiple times and you're getting different results, that is bad. So you need to be able to have enough detail in your test cases to get reliable data. So when writing your test cases, I included some items that I think would be important here for you. The first part is the test case ID. It's pretty standard for any test plan. You'll have some type of specific ID for each individual test case. Some might have a test name, but I just excluded that, and I have a test case description. The instructions do state a test name. You can include it if you'd like. It's completely up to you. Between the test case ID and the test case description, I should be able to identify that that specific test is unique. So the next part is the test case description. A test case description is just a simple statement to explain what the scenario would be. So for this specific test case scenario, I'm checking the login functionality. So that's listed here. And so for my first test case, we have check response when valid email and password is entered. So that's what we will be testing, to making sure that we get a valid response and that the login is successful if we enter a valid email and password. So the next part is your actually test steps. In order to execute a test case, a tester needs to be able to perform a specific set of actions in your application under test, also known as AUT, application under test. So you might see that pop up. Many times the test steps are not simple as above. Hence, they need documentation. Also, the author of the test case may have the organization or go on vacation or is sick or off duty or is very busy with other critical tasks. So it's very important that the steps are easy to follow and is detailed enough that anyone can conduct these tests. The next part is your test data. So in order to execute the test case, you would need test data. Identifying test data can be time-consuming and many times require creating test data afresh. This is the reason it needs to be documented. So in this case, the test data is pretty simple. It's my email and my password, and that's what I'm using to test the login functionality to see if it actually works. The next part is the expected results. So from this test, with your test steps and your test data, what is the expected results that you are hoping to see? So you have to list that out. So for this specific test case, login should be successful, as listed here. So the goal of the test cases in software testing is to check the behavior of the AUT for any expected results. So you have to know what you're testing. You have to understand your product and the features that you're testing in order to come up with these reliable test data or test cases and know what the expected results should be. So if you're going through and you're doing your test and you're just not getting the results that you're expecting, then chances are your test case is not correct. So you need to go back and look at that and redo it. That's completely fine. Even if you're conducting your test and you realize, hey, this isn't quite working, go back and fix your test cases and then conduct the test again. The last part here is the actual results. So this is for when you're actually conducting your test. So I went in and I tested this test case and I was able to log in successfully. So I documented that I was able to log in successfully. Another part of test plans and test cases that you'll see is a pass-fail column. So pass means obviously the test passed. I was able to complete the test case and get the expected results that I expected. So if that failed for whatever reason, there could be an issue with your test case, or if your test case is correct, that could mean that there's a bug or some type of issue in your product or in your feature. So here's some other examples that I listed. Pretty simple. You can take a look at those. As indicated here, please pay special attention to the instructions for this section and make sure you have everything in the instructions it's asking for. So just make sure that you don't need any additional details or any other information that you might be missing. I do want to note about preconditions and postconditions. So as part of your test cases, you may have additional fields, one of them being preconditions, which specifies things that must be in place before the test can be ran. For our specific test cases, a precondition would be that we have to have a browser installed to have access to the site under test. So a test case may also include postconditions as well, which specifies anything that applies after the test case is completes. For our test case, a postcondition would be time or date and login is stored into the database. So keep this in mind when working on your camera test cases. Is there any preconditions or postconditions that you need to document? The last part of this lab is to write a report describing your findings. This report consists of each test case in your test plan. If there are 6 test cases, then there should be 6 sections in your report. Each section must have the following information. 1, the name of the test case. In this case, the test ID and the test case description would be fine. The next part is the test case as it was listed in your test plan. So that's why I included just all the information here. The third part is exactly what happened when you conducted the test. So I have a column listed here. So you'll list out exactly what happened. Any important information that is beneficial for the person reviewing this test plan that they might need to know. This could be a developer that needs to fix issues, things like that. So just be detailed enough in here. The last part is, what did we learn from the test case? Did the camera behave as expected, or was the collected data within the expected range of values? So some questions just to get you thinking about what you learned. So that'll be it for this week. So I went over these instructions briefly while going through that. Please read through that. So here, just taking a look at the course modular, make sure I have everything covered. I think I'm good. So just please pay attention to the due dates. Make sure you're completing these tasks on time. Go ahead and read through these instructions and try to be prepared for our office hours on Wednesday. It's better discussions if you already understand the assignments and you just want clarification on something. So come prepared. Thank you.
You're welcome.